Okay, friends, we are here
Wait, you started?
I've already started.
Yeah. Go off and get a beer.
We are going to go get a beer, but I thought I'd start with a wonderful shot of David Lynch's Voir and his films, which have been showing every night here at the Ritz Cinema in the past week in homage to the great film director who sadly passed away a few weeks ago. Shall we continue upstairs?
Well,
this is good enough an intro as any.
Yeah, it is. It's very unique. Why don't I go get a drink and meet you up there?
All right, sounds good. See you all soon. This cinema is Art Deco to the max, is it not? Russell, what do you think?
Yeah, it's massive.
It's massive, it's got several floors.
And very fancy.
It's very fitting for the Lynchathon that's been taking place the past 8 days. There is an Egyptian Sphinx. There's a lot of people wearing David Lynch shirts and Twin Peaks shirts. Okay, that's the bar that way. Let's go. Turn it back on. There are statues.
Well, I don't mind that, that's all right.
It's not too bad here.
Yeah, I'll go get.
Do you want to go get a beer?
Spiel.
Get me an apple cider. All right, thanks. Thanks, Russell. So basically, we are here to watch Twin Peaks Fire Walk with me, which David Lynch directed in 1992, a few years after the phenomenal television series Twin Peaks aired in 1990. The mystery of who killed Laura Palmer, whose body was found wrapped in plastic, permeated the television waves, let's say, and was so popular that multitudes of people, millions of people throughout the world would gather weekly to watch the ensuing episode of the mystery series, dining on their cherry pies and drinking black coffee in imitation of the show's protagonist, Dale Cooper, the FBI agent who was sent to investigate the mystery of the death of Laura Palmer. Coming to Twin Peaks later in life, I started watching it maybe in the 2010s. I had never seen it before. My wife had seen it when she was younger, and I found myself captivated by the mystery of this show, not least because it was so influential on television in the 90s, on shows that I loved, like The X-Files, for example. These procedural shows, investigative/detective shows that had they encroached upon the paranormal, and they had supernatural or mystery, horror elements in them. Twin Peaks was the first to do it. But Twin Peaks did it in a very kind of strange and bizarre way, because it was part detective show, procedural, investigative, mostly spearheaded by Special Agent Dale Cooper and Harry S. Truman, the sheriff of the small town. It was also a deep dive into the kind of soap opera genre that, that clogged the daytime television of the United States and various other places, Days of Our Lives, that kind of thing. Honing in on the minutiae of the lives of the characters that populated this small town, and all of their eccentricities and everything else. Cheers, Russ. And it was also a supernatural thriller, and I think that's the element or the dimension of the show that interested me most. The film, released after the show's conclusion as a kind of a cliffhanger, explores the backstory to the murder of Laura Palmer, the last week of her life leading to her demise. And it's also partly procedural in terms of there's an investigation into the disappearance of several women in and around Washington State, which is where Twin Peaks is held, spearheaded by Chester Desmond, an FBI agent portrayed by Chris Isaacs, and he's sent by the bureau chief, let's say, Gordon Cole, played both in the show and in the film by David Lynch, to investigate what was taking place. The supernatural elements in the show are quite subtle at first. It begins like any other kind of procedural detective show, and by the third or fourth episode you realize there's something strange is happening here in relation to the subconscious. The main character, the protagonist, Dale Cooper, is quirky, affable. He undertakes his investigations based on his interpretation of dreams and Tibetan mysticism. The other characters in the show go along for the ride. Very quickly, a group of them reveals to him that a secret society had been set up in the town when they were younger in order to protect the inhabitants from an evil that's lurking in the woods. And very soon you realize that the antagonist, the entity that's responsible for Laura Palmer's death, has come from the woods, Killer Bob, and that it possessed one of the show's characters in order to, let's say, act out its evil intentions and deeds. Now, in order to get to that point, you have to navigate the show's very intricate and sometimes, let's say, convoluted storyline. Basically, Twin Peaks is conditioned by the reality of the Black Lodge and the White Lodge. And these two lodges can be entered through a neutral space that has crisscrossed, let's say, white and black floor and red curtains. It is manifested to Dale Cooper during a dream that he has in the third or so episode of the show. From this supernatural space, various entities communicate both with Dale Cooper and to the other residents of the town, influencing its events. You have positive entities like the Giant, you have negative entities like Killer Bob, and also the Man from Another Place. These surrealist dream sequences that Dale Cooper experiences are utterly fundamental for pop culture in the 90s. They were picked up by The Simpsons and everything else. The kind of backwards walking sequences that happen in this place that can be accessed via dreams and so on and so forth. Laura Palmer's double dwells within the Black Lodge, and within this space, time and space is distorted, it's relativized. Things happen here that affect the past and that will condition inevitably the future, and all of this plays out both in the show and within the film as well, to a large extent. Is there anything that I'm missing, Russell?
No. There's a few. That's the lore in general. That's the lore in general, right? You're just covering. Yeah.
I'm going to cover the lore in general here, and Russell will be giving his interpretation of the symbols in the film itself after we watch the movie again tonight.
The thing I want to talk about tomorrow, or when we do our post review, is the symbols in the cinematography and the Foley, the sounds and that. Because in the film, there's a lot of sounds he focuses on, and symbols like the telegraph pole, electricity, things like that. That's going to be important.
Electricity. Well, you know, the surrealist approach of David Lynch, where it's kind of like the subconscious is playing out within real-world circumstances, is something that was part of his directorial oeuvre, his paintings and everything else from the beginning of his career. Basically, by the time he films and directs Blue Velvet in 1980, I think it is, after he had commercial success with The Elephant Man a few years earlier, and before that, Eraserhead, with Blue Velvet, he tries to critique the, let's say, normal, everyday, humdrum societal circumstances of the United States. The nuclear family, nice cars, safe neighborhoods, etc., by making us see the dark underbelly of what can happen in these ostensibly safe and secure places. And Twin Peaks exaggerates that to a large degree because the characters are affable, eccentric, quirky. They love to go to the local R&R diner and have their coffee and their cherry pie. The police officers are obsessed with donuts.
And they're always lit by a neon sign.
Everything's lit by a neon sign, yeah. it kind of gives this aura of a very innocent place. But when you look at the life of Laura Palmer, what led to her tragic demise, which are things that Russell is going to address in more detail tomorrow. I don't actually want to speak about the film much today. I'm just trying to give the backdrop to the show in a general sense. You see that actually the lives of the people in this town are conditioned by much sinister forces. Now, if you were to watch the show, it ran for 2 seasons. Part of Lynch's, let's say, complaint, he had this complaint for the past 30-odd years, is that they resolved or revealed the identity of Laura Palmer's killer way too early in the show, and that happened just after the conclusion of the first season, which only ran for 7 episodes. I think it got another 22 episodes after the first season. The second season was how many episodes, Russell? 22, yeah. 22, because it's 29 all up. It is, yeah. And the second season, about midway through, maybe just before, they reveal the identity of the killer. All sorts of esoteric and paranormal stuff happens to lead to that conclusion. Basically, the underlying theme here is that sexual violence is satanic, and that's something that Russell will talk about a little bit tomorrow, and I'm in complete agreement with that.
That's not going to be my conclusion.
No, you're looking at the symbols. Yeah, fair enough. But look, I'm not spoiling it. I'm just talking about general themes. And then the show continues. Now, Lynch believed that the continuation of the show was pretty much trying to keep a dead horse alive. Although the introduction of Cooper's past, for example, his former mentor, Wyndham Earle, an ex-FBI agent who'd gone rogue because of his obsession with the paranormal and the occult, Caroline, this Wyndham Earle's wife, who went into the witness protection program under Dale Cooper, and Dale Cooper and her had an affair. All these sorts of things play out to show that Dale, this quirky, affable, intertranscendental meditation, Tibetan mysticism, Jungian kind of character with his quirks and his charm, also has flaws. His flaws are really apparent towards the end of the second season, where while he was careful and meticulous in trying to hunt down and identify Laura Palmer's killer, he tried to be on top of that as best as he could, and he was very determined. When it came to the threats posed to the other young women in the town, Laura's friends, especially to Annie, Heather Graham's character in the show, he loses his guard because he became besotted with Annie. And this leads to his downfall at the end of the show, in the final episode, where in order to save Annie, whose fear is manipulated by Wyndham Earle, used as a gateway, as a kind of a key to enter the Black Lodge.
Get up there, it's busy.
Basically, he follows the entrance into the Black Lodge. It's revealed that it can only be entered at a certain point in time, astronomically and astrologically, and all these sorts of things. And what this represents archetypally, I haven't seen this addressed anywhere in the literature or the scholarship, but it's a descent into hell motif, a kataphasis motif, which is a motif that occurred in storytelling very early in Western civilization. It's something that you find in Homer's Odyssey, for example, when Odysseus, the hero, after leaving Troy, he was victorious in the Trojan War, trying to get back to his home in Ithaca. He has to, in order to continue his journey, he reaches a low point in his journey after being sidetracked and blown off course by Poseidon and everything else. He has to go to the gates of the underworld, to Tartarus, in order to communicate with a prophet, Tiresias, and this prophet gives him the information that he will need in order to come back from this low point in his experience, this nadir, and successfully complete his journey to Ithaca, to reclaim his home, to rekindle his relationship with his wife, and to reacquaint himself with his son Telemachus. In the Aeneid, written 800 years later by Virgil, the Roman Emperor Augustus's chief propagandist, Aeneas, who is a Trojan hero. Odysseus was a Greek. Aeneas is a Trojan hero who is seen as the progenitor of Roman civilization. It's from his descendants that Romulus and Remus go on to found Rome. Aeneas also, at the low point in his journey, has to enter into the underworld, to Tartarus, known as Hades. It's actually ruled by Hades. and he has to communicate with his dead father, Anchises, who communicates to him the future history of Rome, and how from his descendants via Romulus and Remus, the Roman Empire would spread to the edge of the earth under the Emperor Augustus. So you can see it's a very classical idea. It's there in the earlier myths. Hercules goes to the underworld and is successful with his 12th labor. Theseus goes into the underworld, but he's unsuccessful. It's a motif that gets more or less secularized in contemporary literature, or construed in fantastical terms. The underworld doesn't have to be a literal topographical space. It can just be the lowest point in the hero's story, like when Luke Skywalker is suffering on the planet Hoth, for example, and dying from the cold, and at that moment Ben Kenobi appears to him and says, go to the Dagobah system in The Empire Strikes Back, and he goes off to find Yoda, who completes his training. These motifs are universal in literature. You can find them in Harry Potter, you find them in The Lord of the Rings, and you find them also in Twin Peaks. Dale enters the underworld in order to save Annie, but he is not prepared. And because he's not prepared, he's bested by the denizens of the Black Lodge, namely Killer Bob. Wyndham Earl becomes a victim of the Black Lodge, and instead of emerging successful, his doppelganger emerges in his place. The Black Lodge contains doubles of the people who are affected by it or who suffer violence. These are demonic duplicates of people in the town of Twin Peaks. And so his double, the evil Dale, emerges into the real world to cause havoc. So that's how the show ended, on a cliffhanger, in 1991. It wasn't going to get another season. That's the ending that people thought that they would have in relation to Dale Cooper and his story. But Lynch did get an opportunity to make the prequel film that explored Laura Palmer's story, and the intention was to make a trilogy. That never panned out. And so we ended up with the prequel, we ended up with the 2 seasons, a couple of supplementary materials like the Diary of Laura Palmer that was published, the tapes of Dale Cooper that he would communicate to Diane, and that was it. Until what happened? In the 2010s, Lynch and his longtime... Yeah, it was 2017 when it came out, but Lynch and his longtime collaborator Mark Frost, with whom he worked on the original series, together with Mark Frost, who tempered Lynch's, let's say, exaggerated surrealism. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, definitely. And I think in a good way. I'll talk about it tomorrow, but I think similar with the episodes that aren't directed by Lynch, some argue aren't as good, but I think they are equally as good. They just lean more into Mark Frost's vision.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he had a sobering influence. At least he maps out a lot of the mythology behind the show. So they came back and did 19 episodes for Twin Peaks The Return, which is phenomenal. And it takes this narrative about demonic or alien, extraterrestrial, but understood in a spiritual sense, entities that inhabit the town of Twin Peaks, and it extrapolates them to a cosmic scale, a cosmic war, which is already anticipated and hinted at in the film Fire Walk With Me that we're going to watch again tonight. And Russell will tell you more about that war tomorrow, because he'll be mentioning some of the motifs, the symbolic motifs within Fire Walk With Me that feed into the narrative of Twin Peaks The Return. There were supplementary books that were published by Mark Frost to elucidate some of the loose threads that Lynch had left hanging, and also fill out the story of the inhabitants of the town between the end of the original series and Twin Peaks The Return. That main book, a collection of dossier folders and newspaper clippings and journal articles, it's a phenomenal book. The Secret History of Twin Peaks was released just before Twin Peaks The Return aired. And also an epilogue, which is another series of case files, FBI case files, known as the, what was it called? The Secret History of Twin Peaks and the Dossier. The Dossier. Okay, I think that's all we're going to talk about now. We're going to go watch the movie. Tomorrow, I think we'll be going to the same park bench we went to for our Nosferatu review in order to give you the the spiel. Do you have any?
No. I want to keep it brief.
Keeping it brief. See you on the other side. Okay, we're back after watching the 1992 David Lynch film Fire Walk With Me last night in the cinema. Gosh, just some brief impressions from me. I forgot how confronting the latter half of that film is. Really enjoyed all of the scenes at the beginning, the investigation of the murder of Teresa Banks by FBI Special Agent Chester Desmond, played by Chris Isaac, and Kiefer Sutherland's character, the intimations of the presence of the entities from the Black Lodge there, the appearance of FBI Special Agent Dale Cooper and David Lynch as the FBI Director Gordon Cole. All of that was fantastic. Then when that last week of Laura's life, which is presupposed in the show, which has all these quirky elements, that was quite confronting. I mean, it's a good warning about the dangers and the evils of prostitution, drug abuse and sexual violence, but I didn't think it's something that needed to necessarily be seen. There's some interesting symbolism towards the end that Russell's going to talk about, I think. I'm just glad that Twin Peaks The Return, which aired in 2017, it was still darker in tone than the original series. The original series was a widespread popular phenomenon because it was able to appeal to mass audiences with its quirky characters. The absence of characters like Major Garland Briggs, who enters the White Lodge. He undergoes a kind of apotheosis in the original show. He becomes one with the good spirits, let's say, in the White Lodge. He's missing from Fire Walk With Me. So is Detective Andy, who's so soft-hearted, and Lucy, the secretary in the sheriff's police station. So their absence is felt in the film. I feel like 2017's Twin Peaks The Return integrates some of the comedic and light-hearted elements, especially Dougie's, which is a version of Dale Cooper that comes out of the lodge that's created. That character's relationship with the criminals played by Belushi and the other guy from Prison Break, I forget his name. So there's some of that in The Return, but it's still dark, but not as dark as the film. If anybody's starting on their Twin Peaks journey, watch the first 2 seasons of the show from 1990 to 1991 first. It's the most, let's say, digestible for a mass audience, and then, the film with the big caveat about how confronting the latter half is. And then The Return, Twin Peaks The Return. Russell, I'm going to turn it over to you now to speak about.
Well, I'll just keep interjecting when I have a good thought, but I think I'm not so sure that it's necessarily a bad thing that it's that dark at the end, because I think the whole film is supposed to be a little bit of a juxtaposition of the Twin Peaks town, which is a bit quirky. The quirkiness sort of overrides the darkness that's lurking beneath, whereas this one, the whole film, everywhere you go, it is darkness, though, particularly the trailer park. Trailer park, I couldn't get over how realistic it feels. The doors are properly run down and shabby. The characters look not like perfect, clean, straight white teeth people with a bit of dust and black makeup on to make them look like they've been out, working on grease, usually getting greased up, working on cars or something like that. Except for the soot-faced lady, which is another peculiar thing.
But she must be from the Black Lodge. I mean,
yeah, she's that's a tangent because that scene has something profound going on.
Okay.
But the aesthetics of it, it's a little bit more suburban, but doesn't have as much of the idyllic parts, and it seems to focus on the gritty. And then I think that's why at the end it's really a confronting shock factor, because the film is also addressing what incest, sexual violence, dissociative amnesia, and there are a lot of other themes like that. Those themes match what was happening at the time, which I remember in a podcast I read, someone was saying this. Lynch loves to work off what he's observing about the American psyche at the time. And at that time, a big thing was repressed traumatic memories that people were trying to attribute to people in sort of therapy, bad therapy. And there was the satanic panic. People thought there were these sort of demonic forces of people going around, producing horrible effects in people. And so everyone started thinking there's demons lurking beneath people's problems.
Which, is in any case part and parcel of many religious traditions, but you can over-exaggerate that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So Christians believe in the reality of the demonic, and I think as a Christian watching this show, you can really appreciate that while human beings are created free and in the image of God, let's say, and freely choose to do evil, nevertheless evil has ultimately a supernatural source. But that's just to give that clarification. But you're right, there was that kind of satanic panic behind heavy metal music, I remember the Judas Priest and various other heavy metal bands were brought in front of a tribunal, having to justify their music and whether or not it kind of causes or incites negative behaviour in its listeners. That all happened in the 80s and 90s, that kind of thing.
But I think because the show is sort of addressing like fantastical elements of dreams a lot, then it's also got the quirky,
very Jungian.
It was also a play on TV back then, how it was so idyllic and pretty, and it had that running soap opera in the background, and then they were sort of playing out the soap operas, whereas this had none of that.
None of that.
It just went to the darker themes that people were openly talking about at the time back then. So people were addressing things like sexual violence more back then, around the 90s. So the film is then, I don't know,
which is an important thing to address, because we still have in Australia domestic violence epidemic. These things need to be exposed and they need to be condemned, and people's behaviour needs to reform. But maybe that's a good pretext to discuss the plot line of the movie, because from the very beginning you get all these deep symbols, right?
Yeah. That was the other thing, is that somehow the symbols stand out more in the film because there's less quirkiness going on.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the intention throughout the film. Obviously, like most people, one of the reasons why I love Twin Peaks is the quirkiness of the show. Like Dale Cooper is just phenomenal in every scene, and lovable and affable, and he's a good guy. He's naive at times, but he's a good guy. And you notice as well, like, think of all the characters, the sheriffs and everyone working at the sheriff's office in Twin Peaks, as opposed to the one they go and visit. They're all horrible. At the beginning of the film, and they have that sort of interplay between the I don't remember the names in it, the secretary and the Sheriff Cable's deputy or whatever, and they've got the same kind of dynamic, but they're just all horrible people. And to give context, this is when the two FBI agents, played by Chris Isaac and Kiefer Sutherland, are sent by Gordon Cole to investigate the murder of Teresa Banks, who is associated with Laura Palmer and her friends in the prostitution ring. But in that investigation, or before going to investigate that, but at the airport, what are the symbols there? The airport? Don't you remember when they're sent on a plane? Chris Isaac arrives. Oh, yeah. I don't think it. Is it like a field? Tarmac of a runway or something. Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess you would call it an airport. Geez, it's funny. I haven't thought about that all morning, considering I just watched the film, because there's so much to digest. It does remind me that, like, geez, they're good at humour. Yeah. They're so good at humour. The thing I found most interesting about this is I just thought, well, it's a Twin Peaks Lynch kind of thing. That's why we love it. It's quirky, it's odd. But then, I've forgotten his name. I'm terrible with names. Kiefer Sutherland's character straight away says, what were the meaning of what that lady was doing? So Agent Cole, what was she doing? For some strange reason, has to invite his wife's sister's friend or something to wear this bizarre red dress and a really strange haircut, which I can't remember. I just know it's strange. And she's doing this sort of interpretive mime.
Gestures, yeah.
Gestures. She's miming out clues about what's about to happen. I mean, it's very much like a dream.
Surrealist, yeah.
It's surrealism, and there's like obviously meaning behind what's happening, because if you think about a lot of your dreams, it's collections of events and experiences from the days or the past, and they're mushed together in a kind of slightly incoherent way, but there's enough there for you to pull it out and make sense of. But she has a few things where she's scrunching her face up, they're sour, and her eyes, and they're saying essentially they're going to find trouble when they go to the small sheriff's town trying to investigate this murder. And the most important part is that it finishes on a little blue rose that's in her to the left, and that Chris Isaac's character, I should remember their names, but I can't do it.
The blue rose.
He says we won't talk about that.
We won't talk about the blue rose. Yeah,
we won't talk about the blue rose,
which is an Easter egg that kind of gets blown up in.
Can we say? Are you gonna?
We can jump forward. It's okay. Spoilers, guys. So
the
Blue Rose case is investigated by FBI agent Gordon Cole, Special Director Gordon Cole, and his crew are associated, what you find out eventually, with these paranormal events that take place in and around the town of Twin Peaks. And, spoiler, it has to do with them trying to capture an ancient Mesopotamian demon named Judy, who spawns the evil Killer Bob that dwells in the Black Lodge in a sequence that appears in Twin Peaks: The Return in 2017. But before we talk about that, it's perhaps important to jump to the next symbolically redolent scene, which is when FBI agent, Special Agent Dale Cooper, played so well by Kyle MacLachlan, comes to visit Gordon Cole at his office, Special Director Gordon Cole, and tells him that the dream that he had is about to take place. So his dreams are always prescient. Dale Cooper's, they're about the future. And the dream plays out in a weird way that bends time and space. Basically, Dale goes in and out of a room where they're monitoring on screens a security camera. And he goes in and out a couple of times. He's waiting to identify something. Into the room and back out into the hallway, looking directly at the camera. The last time he does this, he's looking directly at the camera, and he goes back into the security room, and he sees on the monitor himself still out there in the corridor. So something is happening to time, and to space, because at that moment, Special Agent Philip Jeffries, played by the enigmatic David Bowie, gets out of the elevator and walks directly into Gordon Cole's office. And at that point, Dale Cooper says, Gordon, and runs into the office. And then Gordon Cole, played by David Lynch, none the wiser to what's happening, says this is the long-lost agent Philip Jeffries, who had disappeared investigating this Blue Rose paranormal stuff you find out in the book, The Secret History of Twin Peaks, in Argentina, somewhere in South America. He had entered the Black Lodge and discovered all of these entities. And he says, the first thing he says is, I don't want to talk about Judy. Let's not talk about her.
Let's not talk about Judy.
That's it. Let's not talk about Judy.
Let's
not talk about Judy.
Do you want to finish that?
Yeah, just
I've got 3 points to make.
Make them. I'll just finish the narrative part and you can interpret it. So basically, after Philip Jeffries appears, as he's talking about his encounters with these entities from the Black Lodge, it jumps to the room above the convenience store that's mentioned in the first season of Twin Peaks in the 3rd episode by the one-armed man, Philip Gerard, Mike, who's inhabited by the spirit Mike. And all the entities are there, and they're just gross and foul, and they thrive off of pain and suffering. So Philip Jeffries has encountered them. Albert is in the room, and then all of a sudden, after this static jumping back and forth between Philip Jeffries speaking to Cole and Cooper and the other FBI special agents, you can see how influential this was for the X-Files, all this stuff. And then jumping to the Black Lodge, Jeffries disappears, and when Albert checks with the front desk, it was like he was never there.
Yeah.
So that's, again, has to do with the bending of time and space, with events taking place in a way that foreshadows what's to come in relation to Dale Cooper's eventual descent into the Black Lodge. He will go into it the way that Jeffries did. He gets out, we know, with Twin Peaks: The Return, eventually, but it takes 25 years as prophesied by the one-armed man, Mike, within the Black Lodge, and that's all in the show. Do you want to give your 3 points?
My first point is one that's not really related to the symbology of what we're doing, but an interesting thing is, so like Foley, which is the art of, this is the person that has to make the sounds for a film, right? Because you can't just go out and get perfect sound. You have to add things like walking, banging on a door, shutting a car door, gravel on the ground, those kind of things.
Yeah.
And eliminate a lot of noises too. Like, so much of his work is an obsession with weird, out of place
sounds.
Yeah, like obscene sounds, static, electricity obviously being a big thing. Someone tried to get it out of him, David Lynch, but they think that his obsession is the electricity because of electricity in our brains, water and electricity that make our brains. But
that was in the trailer park as well. Yeah. The electricity pole.
Electricity is huge.
It's a conduit for these entities,
And so
the good and the bad.
Well, and ironically, the wet wear of our brains, maybe that's a reason for the conduit of them to come through on it. But anyway, the thing I thought so interesting about that scene was it goes in with, like they were talking about it on this podcast I was listening to recently. A big theory is that opening sequence is Dale Cooper's dream. Or it's the other theory, it's him sharing dreams with Laura Palmer, which has been a suggested theme as well. That, he reads her diary and it's like, how come we're having the same dream?
Well, that comes up later on when Laura is experiencing her suffering, and she has a dream after she's given that painting of the room above the convenience store, which is an entrance into the Black Lodge by that old lady and her grandson. They're also creatures, I think, from either the Red Room or the White Lodge. They don't seem to be baddies. They seem to be either neutral or goodies. They help Laura. She has a dream from the future when Dale is in the Black Lodge. And Mike is showing Dale what in that dream?
I was still...
The one-armed man. Mike is holding
the ring.
Which is a symbol of what?
I can't remember what it is, but it looks like a beetle.
It's an owl. It's an owl. That is the same symbol that they find at the end of season 2 when they enter the cave system in order to discover the entrance to the Black Lodge.
Yeah, that's right.
So owls, which in ancient Greek mythology and folklore, in ancient Greek mythology, the owl was associated with the goddess of wisdom, Athena, so knowledge and wisdom. But in folklore, in medieval Greece and throughout the Balkans and various parts of the world, the owl is a harbinger of death. In the Peloponnese in southern Greece, for example, up until recently, for example, mid-20th century, there might be villages around that believe this to this day. They believe that if you hear an owl hooting at night, it means someone's going to die.
Yeah.
And when Bob leaves Leland Palmer, who he'd been possessing to inflict those cruel and evil deeds upon Laura, at the end of the resolution episode, in the beginning of the second season, he flees in an owl. He inhabits an owl and he enters the Black Lodge in the Twin Peaks woods that way. So that ring with the owl seems to be a gateway into the Black Lodge. And he holds it up to Cooper, and what does Cooper say? He looks at the screen, he looks at Laura.
Oh, don't take it.
Don't take the ring, Laura.
Can I just, because I'm going to lose this thread because I only had it since this morning. But the perplexing part is, so he says, who is this man? So Philip Jeffries says, who is this man to Dale Cooper? And remember, he's in one room but also in the camera. So there's the insinuation that Evil Cooper's out there, or he's seen Evil Cooper in the lodge, right? We still don't know as well, like, what, if this was a dream, to what point was it a dream? Like, they're in the room and Philip Jeffries comes in and disappears, and then that's when he starts to relay his dream. But I think the other important point about, like, getting to the hours, Cooper was always...
So that's an interpretation.
It's an interpretation. And this is the whole difficult thing with Twin Peaks is you're trying to look for a coherent interpretation of everything, but like with any sort of philosophical worldviews, religious worldviews, as soon as you have certain fundamental assumptions like everything is a dream or it's not, it's all real supernatural phenomena, then you have to make the other parts fit and you have to rejig everything.
It's both and with Lynch, isn't it? And he doesn't want to give you an answer.
But that's why it's so brilliant, because he pulls you into thinking, no, this is just a metaphor for the things that were going on at the time. But then he makes so much of the symbolism, the supernatural seem real, that you're like, no, it can't be. And then so when you jump into that world trying to interpret, you're like, what does make sense? But an interesting thing I wanted to say about that scene is what he does is he keeps the non-linear and the circle theory of time going, which is modern understanding of time since Newton has basically been linear, or static block theory, everything's laid out and planned, but it's all in the direction of going forwards or possibly backwards.
Yeah, it's causation.
But they don't let you do that in that scene because Cooper's in two places at once, and then he's talking to them, but then he's there, but then disappears, and then
Jeffries.
It's not just like a slice of here he is, now he's just vanished. It was like was he even there? But he was, and it was really...
Time and space are relativized because of the presence of the lodge.
Yeah.
And you know, Jeffries is carrying the lodge with him.
But the way they do it is
it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. It's so well executed, you know. You get more of this in the show, like I said, the ending of the second season and the whole beginning of the return, season 3.
One last thing just to get in is Cooper is always unflappable and handles things and has that mysterious, constant curiosity in seasons 1 and 2. What's interesting about this is, and it could be a matter of it's a dream, it's a time thing, he seems so unsettled, which is very different for Cooper, which means that, like, has he, like with the owl, the tree of knowledge, if you are too curious and digest too much knowledge, you'll discover something so unsettling that it fundamentally changes you.
Well, that could be that's a very good point. It's a very good observation, because he has that dream that he relates to Albert the last time you see him in that field office that Philip Jeffries entered, where he says, I feel there's going to be another murder victim to Teresa Banks. They're also looking at this point for Chester Desmond, who's gone missing because he picked up the ring as well underneath in the trailer park. So this ring is a kind of like a key to the Black Lodge, whether you want it to be or not. Chester Desmond disappears as well, and so Cooper goes to the trailer park looking for him, and before he goes to it, he has this feeling that he relates to Albert, who's such an important character in both the second season of the show. He comes to assist Dale Cooper with investigating the murder of Laura Palmer, but he's also in Twin Peaks: The Return, looking for Dale Cooper along with Gordon Cole. Albert, played by Miguel Ferrer, who passed away as well recently, a few years ago, is essential to Twin Peaks. And he tells him, look, I feel like there's going to be another victim, and Dale describes Laura Palmer. Yeah. So,
and I love, for me, Albert is essential to the whole series, because I'm very much like Albert, very prone to the skepticism, very prone to the, well, come on, explain to me what she's doing, what does she look like? He's like, you're describing half of the country.
Yeah, exactly.
Which gets
half
back to the, like, it's
a
phenomenon that they were thinking about at the time. Obviously Lynch was trying to capture, but Albert, as the journey goes on, has that cynicism eroded to some extent.
He does, especially in the third season, The Return, when they encounter the evil Dale after Dale had been
he makes it
so
important that the skeptics of us in the world are very important for the supernatural to make sense.
That's why this works so well, because we contrast a bit. So yeah, that's more symbolism there. We jumped a bit. I maybe jumped the gun, but we spoke about Laura's dream.
Can we do something interesting? Can I do like things that are bugging me, symbolism that are bugging me, and rattle them off and see if you can give me an answer
in relation to Twin Peaks?
Yeah, the movie.
Fire Walk with Me.
Yeah.
Okay, can we discuss one last piece of symbolism before we do that? So we've got the entrance, which is the ring, and Laura picks that up finally just before she's murdered. She takes the ring, which is an entrance to the Black Lodge. In the scene where she has the dream about Dale warning her, she also sees Dale's girlfriend from the end of the second season. Remember, this is all set way before Laura's murder, right? at the end of the second season, the murder had been ostensibly solved.
Yeah, Annie
Blackburn,
that
who,
scene
as I mentioned yesterday, Dale, unfortunately, to save her, and he does save her.
But again, they're sharing dreams.
The dream space is beyond time and space in this. It relativizes the linear conception of time that you eloquently articulated earlier. So what happens is Annie appears in the bed next to Laura, who's kind of having a dream within a dream. First she dreams about the ring and Dale, and then she gets up in her dream and she sees Annie's face covered in blood next to her, and Annie says, "My name is Annie Blackburn. I'm with Laura and Dale in the lodge. The good Dale is in the lodge and he cannot leave. Write this in your diary."
Yeah.
And she kind of wakes up again.
But what's her response?
She doesn't give a response.
Nothing,
But she writes it in the diary, and those pages of the diary are hidden, we find out in Twin Peaks The Return, in the toilet door in the sheriff's station. So it's all connected. Over 25 years, all this stuff is connected. This is the best part about Twin Peaks, this kind of the nuggets and hints that you get at various places to piece together this narrative that spans 30 years with its good versus evil. And there's real good in the show, exemplified by Dale Cooper, by the giant in the show, and the opera singer in episode 8 of The Return, who kind of sends Laura, you find out, as a kind of sacrificial victim to Earth in order, through her terrible death, to finally have Bob defeated through these FBI agents fighting against Bob and everything else. So that's another element, a cosmic, very gnostic element in the series. But another positive element given towards the end of the film is that Laura has a painting of an angel taking care of children, a winged angel taking care of children in her bedroom. On the night of her murder, the angel disappears from the painting. But her and the other victim, Renette Polanski, see the angel. Renette sees it before she's kind of inadvertently let go by Leland, Laura's father, who commits these crimes inhabited by Bob. And then Laura sees the angel in the in the red room.
Inhabited by Bob and enabled by Judy.
And enabled by Judy, which the Mesopotamian demon, you actually find out, is Laura's mum. Well, she's inhabiting Laura's mum, who allows the abuse to take place.
She's definitely a vessel. I don't think. Yeah.
Well, she's a vessel, no, because it's clear in The Return.
Yeah.
It's too supernatural.
She doesn't seem to have the same consciousness or awareness that the others do.
She blocks it out.
Or the cigarettes.
Yeah, we don't want to talk much more about that side. Like that side of things in this show is very dark and confronting, and I can see why it put people off the film, because it's so dark, as you pointed out earlier, that people coming into the film after having watched the show were probably like, "What am I watching?"
I don't think that would have put people off. I think what would put... It depends, like who we saying got put off. I would imagine if someone...
The average audience, because it was viewed by everybody. Everybody knows. I was speaking to a male on the phone this morning who'd never seen Twin Peaks, and he's like, "Yeah, Laura Palmer, wrapped in plastic." But I've never watched it. You know,
but
he knew
when
about
I talk to people, like my wife watches a million murder shows, and they're far more like they're...
We're talking 1992.
Yeah, but yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so maybe it's because whenever I tell people about Twin Peaks, they see the scene above the convenience store, and they're like, "What the?"
Yeah, it's
then
weird.
They turn it off, and I'm like, "Oh, I love those bits."
Yeah. Your questions. Let's get to your questions.
All right, so should I do it in order of the film or whatever comes to mind?
Whatever comes to mind.
So first, what's the telegraph pole with the number, the 24810 with the number 6?
You remember that, huh? You remember the number? I don't know.
Oh, I think that's the number.
Yeah.
It occurs twice, and he holds the camera on it. So it's at the telegraph pole. I know electricity is important, but is that number important? I can't remember. And
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
There's probably an answer somewhere in one of those. Let's show the. Could you hold that for a sec? Just hold it on you for a sec.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe I'll rattle some off, and you can come back to it. The soot-faced lady, and then. What's his name?
In one of these books. You didn't bring your secret history, but that's the final dossier. Oh, did you?
It's in my bag.
Do you want to get it out and show everybody?
Right here, hold it.
That's where you get all of the details that fill in the weird, enigmatic scene. So that's by Mark Frost, Lynch's collaborator. That's the final dossier that clarifies everything after Twin Peaks: The Return, Season 3. And this is the book, Secret History of Twin Peaks, Russell's copy, that prepares you for the return of the show.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are really worth it.
So the other thing is... Oh, am I still on? So Carl sees the soot-faced woman, and the detectives see her, and they're like, what is going on? Do you know anything about this? And she just looks sort of terrified, and then she backs away, and then Carl says, I don't want to go any more places. I like where I am.
I think Carl is plugged into that world, because he sees in The Return, after the evil Dale's son runs over that kid,
that's right,
the soul of that boy go to heaven, remember, as a light. So he's
that's true.
Carl is
it's
intuitive.
A lot of the stuff I wish I could have more time to refresh my memory.
But that's why we're talking. That's the whole point.
Okay, all right. So there's that. The other thing is the horse, which returns again towards the end.
Don't know what the horse means.
Yeah, I always forget the horse, and that's a classic one. That's in The Simpsons and pop culture
The
references.
giant is dancing with the horse in The Simpsons. Do you remember?
That's I read. And
see, it really affected everything, all pop culture when it came out. It was huge.
Yeah, I know, and it's annoying when people say it's a stupid show. The other thing is, I'll leave the angel to the end, because I find that one, the Gargonzola, the Garmonbozia, pain and suffering, but they have the cream corn, and a lot of people said, see, he doesn't always come back to some of these things, like he doesn't flesh out.
He dropped that in The Return.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. But he does that quite often. You think he gives you a little something, and then people are like, oh, what's it going to mean? And it's just left. So I don't know if that has some symbolic meaning it's supposed to get at.
I think because cream corn is like manufactured and full of preservatives, and it's, do you know what I mean? It looks gross. But the Garmonbozia thing, where these evil spirits are attracted to pain and suffering, which is also how Wyndham Earl gains access to the lodge. It's the suffering of Annie. And this is very, it resonates with most religious traditions' approaches towards evil, that they attract and engender pain and suffering.
There's a the other thing I was going to say to you is, but I'm going to...
the name Garmonbozia, he made it up. So
I know.
Out of nowhere.
It's a classic, and it sounds very Lynch. I was going to talk about cars as symbols, but there's a good book by Brian Appleyard on cars and their influence in culture and that. I think it's probably a little less mystical or meaningful, and he's just very good at the placement of the right cars, because when Laura goes to visit Harold when she's distressed, she's driving this beautiful old, was it a Buick, 1950s Buick, big old, kind of, Marilyn Monroe kind of car you would see. Her dad drives this like strange, kind of old but wannabe cool convertible. The truck at Leo's house is so important, that big truck. And
he exemplifies his toxic masculinity, because he's such a bad guy,
More so, him getting away in that beautiful red 1990 Chevrolet Corvette. Of course, this is sheriff's car. It's a classic copper's car you'd get in America with Let's Rock on it. I don't know if he's trying to really
That's
convey
Chester
anything.
Desmond's car.
And I think a lot of that is just like the same thing you'd learn about, like in period pieces like Mad Men. The attention to detail of the cars is really, really important. People who don't know cars won't get it, but they don't understand that you associate so much of your life with being driven around in a car, and then part of the car becomes a symbol for certain people, certain characteristics, certain times. So those, I think that's not meaningful in a big sense.
Well, it is. It adds to the timelessness of the town, because even though it's set in modern times, it has this 1950s neo-noir, Art Nouveau, Art Deco feel to it, which is it gives a sense of timelessness. That's hampered a bit with the contemporary music he puts in the film, but the show is like pretty timeless.
But like, it's important for me, because I love cars, is when I see the cars and the characters, they make sense to me. And
they match.
It's what I hate about cheap TV is they'll just this car will do, but it doesn't fit the character. it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it goes to show Lynch's attention to detail with every aspect of
or whoever
of his character building. Or well, I think he was quite
Leo's Ute is important. Jark's Ute, I mean, and there's other things.
Yeah. But I think in order to wrap it up, because we've gone for maybe an hour, let's. Could you hold this for a second, including last night's 20 minutes?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, Blu-ray box set. Well worth picking up. That was released several years ago, which has got the whole show and the film and a lot of documentaries, and that's the entire mystery before The Return was advertised. So this is from maybe a decade ago. Laura Palmer there on the cover. There's Twin Peaks The Return, a limited event series you can pick up. That's the DVD version. And the very first, if you can still find it, the very first DVD version that they released was the gold set. That it's got a quote from David Lynch on the back saying, "I think this is a great definitive Twin Peaks gold set." Lots of documentaries, Saturday Night Live excerpts, interviews with Lynch and the cast, Kyle MacLachlan, and others. And I think our final words on David Lynch is God rest his soul. You know, he was a very talented filmmaker. The film industry will be impoverished by his loss, because for him, making movies was part of a greater art. It wasn't just a profession.
Yeah.
As anyone who watches interviews with him will know, he wanted to communicate ideas that came to him in a very kind of unique and interesting way, surrealist way. And thank you, David.
Well, another thing, if anyone's interested and you would like us to see us return to talking about Twin Peaks, more than happy to do
Put a comment at the bottom and tell us,
because I've still got to get through Laura Palmer's diary, the book.
Have you got it here?
Yeah, I do actually. I've done it. I've done Dale Cooper's tapes, but Laura Palmer's diary, which was written by David Lynch's daughter, Jennifer Lynch, and in the forward it's great because he talks about, you know, she understood that the world has taken on a life of its own, and it just, she's like the vessel to produce it. So, but both of us have said we want to come back to episode 8 in The Return, because all of the symbology that you've covered today really would be so important to be woven into, correlated to, or whatever, understood by the imagery and symbols in that, because that is just
it's like a cosmic myth.
Like a 50-minute masterpiece of just pure symbols. Okay,
we'll do it down the track for sure, because I'd love to do it as well, but
obviously not
please
tomorrow.
Leave us some maybe in a few weeks,
okay,
or in a month or so, but please leave comments and let us know that you want more Twin Peaks related content from us. We're going to do more movies. There'll be at least one movie a month.
Of course, but we would like to be forced into doing more Twin Peaks.
You heard it here.
Cheers.
Thanks, friends. Bye-bye.